So Eric was the nicest guy. He was
really
so gracious to be on the show today. Before we get into the interview, we do want to go into a little bit of background on Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
Because there's a story behind this movie, and I think to get the fullest experience out of this interview, you should know the background of Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
It's one of the weirdest movies as far as how it was put together.
It really is.
Ever. So Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 came out in 1984. It would have been a massive hit. It came out, and I think a couple weeks into its release, it was pulled from almost all the theaters because people and parents were raging that it was, defiling Christmas and it was an evil movie. A few years later, the producers wanted to make a sequel, but the one thing they didn't want to do was spend any money.
Yep.
So what they did is the producers came to Lee Harry, who was an editor for them, and they presented the idea of Lee recutting all of the footage from the first movie into an entirely new movie.
Yep.
Which I don't know if they don't know that that's not how it works.
So the way that this factors out into SNDN2 is that it ended up being like just an enormous flashback. Like 2/3 of the movie is a flashback of the first film. In case you missed anything from the first film, they literally go over each. And there's maybe a third of this movie that's like that's new material.
And that's the stuff that Lee Harry was able to produce himself. He got himself a shoestring budget and was able to write a script and shoot all the stuff that involved Ricky Caldwell, the new Killer Santa, played by Eric Freeman.
Yeah, who is the little brother of the killer in the original film.
Right, exactly.
Just to clarify.
But he didn't have enough money to make a full-on movie, so that's why 2/3 of Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 is just scenes from Silent Night, Deadly Night. And then as you'll hear that Eric talks about in the interview, they shot this thing at like breakneck speed.
And over like a weekend, right?
It was like, I think 10 days full production. Yeah. And some of that didn't involve Eric.
So there's one part of the interview that I want you to listen for in particular where somebody brought Eric years later. Somebody brought Eric like a copy of the script from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. And he was like, "You have one of these? I never had one of these.
Where did you get a script?"
He was like, "They never gave me a script for this film." And like... Knowing that put it really into perspective for me. So Eric, like we said, is one of the sweetest guys we ever talked to.
And so now you have a better understanding of what Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 is like beyond just, a Killer Santa sequel.
Eric's interview is going to give you a sort of different perspective of what it's like to be a horror icon. It's an important story. And I really appreciate him being as candid with us as he was.
Yeah, Eric was a fantastic guest. I'm so happy to have him here for our Christmas special episode. I wouldn't rather spend holiday with anybody else than one of our favorite Killer Santas.
As far as we're concerned, Eric, you're spending holidays with us, buddy.
That's right, man.
So that said, let's get into this interview with Eric Freeman. So thank you so much for being with us, man. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us.
Yeah, no, you're. Hey, look, I'm lucky I can talk to you. I mean, what are the 1,000,000 to 1 odds that this thing from my past came back? So.
Sure.
Right.
Well, we're huge fans.
Yeah, when you're talking horror and you're talking Christmas, you can't not bring up the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Robert did such a great job in that original that I hadn't seen it back then. I just heard that it was dark, and that was it.
Sure.
But you couldn't find it for the world. I guess if Lee or Joe wanted me to see it, they would have.
And so I guess before we start talking about the movies, Eric, first of all, how's your pandemic been? How have you been handling everything since the world has started falling apart?
I'm fine with it, except there's really no, our state wants to say that, follow the science, but they're closing all this business with no science behind them. And it's pretty wild that it's irreversible at this point. It was bad. You guys were there. I mean, you're 15 days to straighten the curve. Then it was 150 days to straighten the curve. And I got to say on a personal level, and I know that you guys have this in you too, that we're not designed. I mean, I can tell you gregarious, outgoing guys, it's not very wise to tell people, don't engage in life and hunker down and don't talk to anybody and be we have these things to be social, but
it's not the same.
No, and
But I think we also have to consider ourselves lucky that we do have avenues like we're doing right now, where we're chatting across the entire country right now, and we're able to still connect with people in a way that we would not have been able to, if this had happened even 10 years ago.
No, exactly. Just think if it were 10 years ago, I think we'd hear about suicide rates being.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well,
absolutely.
and I do agree with what you said though. It is an unnatural thing. We're not an isolated species. We're not a species designed to isolate, right? We're a pack animal.
Yeah. No, a buddy of mine was saying that exact same thing. He said when this is all over, people are going to be more active than ever. And I was kind of like the contrarian. No, I think they're going to, I thought that this was kind of an antisocial behavior I've seen. The phone is kind of taking people away, the iPhone in particular.
Sure.
You know what I mean? People don't really look at you in the eye anymore they didn't want to shake your hand before. And,
now they're going to shake your hand with a pole from 10 feet away.
Yeah, it's like, I had a hard enough time getting people to talk to me as it was.
You're right. I think that technology has sort of been reinforcing the idea of disconnection for years. You know what I mean? We've been finding ways to remove ourselves from each other more and more, little by little. You know, you can order any food you want with Postmates. You can have it brought to your house. You can order anything you need off of Amazon or Instacart. And it's almost like we were, preparing for this sort of thing. It's interesting that when you remove that option from people, right? When you remove the option to even be social, that's when people all of a sudden use this technology to figure out ways to be social again. It's interesting to me that that's kind of how it's played out.
Yeah, you're right. You analyzed that quite well because we were kind of headed down a path of we set ourselves up for the softest crash, if you will, by going down that road already. But I didn't know if it was reversible, but people can, you can socialize with your phone or texting or this or that all you want, but it is not the same. Even when I see people out in the alley when I'm throwing trash out or whatever, and I'll say hi and I'm hoping for a response. Half the time I don't get one. It's they expect me to have my mask on in the alley in the fresh air. I'm like,
well, to be fair, I think people have a good reason to be concerned when you are coming out with the bag of garbage on garbage day.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you really blame them there, Eric?
Exactly.
You got me.
You set me up for that one. I can't do that.
So I like all this, I'm assuming that maybe there's been some replanning as far as like holiday traditions are concerned for you. I know that like for us at least, like we kind of had to rethink how we're doing holidays this year. Give us an idea of like what your normal holiday traditions were and like if any of that's changed this year.
Yeah, we're curious how one of cinema's great Killer Santas celebrates himself some Christmas.
It's not that much different than anyone else's. Perhaps even more low key. I would go out and search out and find, I usually find like a miniature tree instead of a regular tree. Was always, I'd always decorate something. I've been a loner, I guess, as an actor. I never wanted to be this self-absorbed actor guy that I saw so many people. You really have to be kind of into it for yourself in that game. But I just found this last holiday not to be something I liked. I was somewhat down. Don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of these things that we're doing today have been very helpful to me in the regard of socializing. But I normally would get a little tree and a little gifts, and I'd put things together for my girl and do things in that, and just make it is a little Christmas, but just
sure,
because it's always a special time of year. We know we're always kind of more kind. First, I don't care what reason why, we just are in the November, December time to other people, and
sure.
There's just something magical about it. I like to be part of it in that respect. A buddy of mine says, "Well, I just don't give gifts because of the holiday. I give gifts because I want to. We feel good.
Right.
We feel good about doing these things, and especially this time of year to say, hey, I appreciate your kindness, your friendship, your love, and that's why we do these things. So it's my Christmas isn't probably any different than anyone's. It might even be lesser than most meeting family or getting together family.
Absolutely. I totally hear that. And Eric, we're so thankful to have you here with us for the holidays. Means a lot.
I totally get what you're saying about the small tree. I always loved going for like the Charlie Brown tree, right?
Oh, yeah.
The like the cute miniature tree
just
that's
a single branch with like a single ball hanging from it.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to all the other big tall trees that are all condescending
same.
and full of themselves. So tell me, playing a Killer Santa Claus in a classic Christmas horror movie now. How did that affect Christmas for you? I mean, obviously you had to be the killer Santa for years after that, and people knew you after that movie came out. When you had family gatherings and Christmas, people were a little more cautious?
It had no effect because back when movies in the 80s were being churned out, 80s and early 90s, we'd call them straight to video now, but I saw it in the theater. I found it in the theater. I didn't know it played in Hollywood, but it played in Hollywood in a nice theater at Groman's Chinese up there in the Strip. But
really,
I know the place.
Yeah, I found it in Culver City. It was a rundown theater, and I went there. The reason I'm bringing us back on that is because I had this feeling of watching my movie with a group that they were pretty verbose. They were throwing things at the screen and don't go in there. Look out, you fool! And I'm sitting in the back watching all this because they're talking as much as the dialogue. And I said, well, this thing's gonna die. I said, and a lot of extreme close-ups in that movie that when you're in the theater and my head's 30 feet wide, and it's I said, well, I kind of played that kind of big, and wow, and I was glad, frankly, guys, that it was just going to disappear. It didn't affect my mindset of future holidays I all but forgot it in a sense that sometimes I would remind myself that I did it only. Well, that theater, when I left that night from that theater, my poster was on the wall. And,
right.
And I tore it off the wall. It was stapled on the corners. I ripped it down and I rolled it up. Some guy saw me and he says, hey, and then he goes, oh, you're the guy. And I said, yeah. And then he said, well, what are you doing? Why are you taking your I said, because this is all I have, man. This is it. And he goes, well, why didn't you go to the premiere of this? And I said, there is no premiere. This is it. And sometimes I would come across that particular poster in the back of my closet, which was there for 30 years. And
wow.
I hate even saying that, 30 years. But and I'd say, oh, yeah, I heard it. But I always had respect for it. I didn't throw, it wasn't dented. It just was rolled up, and I said, well, okay, I did that. But I got to be very honest, and I'm not kidding. I kind of just let it go. And it was only because a buddy of mine about 6 years ago had said, I grew up with him back in Minnesota. He just said, hey, Eric, there's this Finding Freeman thing. I blew him off 6 months prior when he told me. My brother died and I was back there. It was a memorial for him, and I really wasn't paying attention. Then I came back and got my car. You got to look at this, Eric. It's kind of big, and they're looking for you, and there's all this. And there's one video with 6 million hits on it, and there's tons of stuff out there. They're looking for you, and so I looked, but because I said, "What's this all about?" He said, "You did a horror film in the late '80s," and I said, "Oh, yeah, and, yeah, you got it."
It's funny how what things come back after time, and what you're referring to is the Finding Freeman movement. So, can you tell me a little bit about those guys, like how you were aware of them before they were aware of you? So they weren't doing a great job of finding you, but they did eventually find you.
Yeah, they apparently some of these guys. I know Patrick Coffey is one of them. He would always do artwork of me. He's an artist, and he would always put stuff out there and splash it out there, kind of keeping it alive. But apparently, some lady that is not doing well health-wise had started it, and it's kind of was organic. But they would call Eric Freemans all over the world and ask if they're and. So I ended up being a pastor in Kansas or a gigolo in Thailand. I ended up being,
yeah.
So it was all just nonsense. But
they eventually got to you.
Yeah. No, it wasn't anything to do. I didn't know anything was popping up, the movie playing or anything. But I called Harry, the director, he had just retired from. He was a kind of a big time editor of trailers. He was an editor prior and a award-winning director prior to being an editor at this Lejeune Studios where they came up with the idea. But he had gone full throat into he opened an editing company with another, but he had basically retired and sold his half to his partner. And I had called just a week after he left, and I left a message on his directory, and he got it. But it was basically, hey, Lee, I'm feeling kind of nostalgic. And I said, just wanted to touch base and see how you're doing. And that was, and then he calls me a day or two later and says, Eric, you know, they want me to go to Quentin Tarantino's New Beverly Cinema to talk about the movie, and you should come up. And I said, well, it's your gig. I don't want to, you know, it's your thing. But no one knew I was going to be there, but I showed up with him. It was surprising because there were a lot of people in the audience that were, it's like they knew I was showing, but no one knew I was showing. There was some had like my work outside, not everything, but a lot of stuff that I did after or before or whatever. They just boxes of stuff. And when I was there, it was crazy, but they would, oh, could you sign this and that? And it's like, wow, I didn't know any of that. So that was all very overwhelming in a way.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one thing about horror fans is horror fans don't let go. You know, we love the movies we love, and we love everything around those movies. And Quentin Tarantino, amongst many other things, is a horror fan, and he's also a big fan of stuff from that era. So I think it's awesome that he was sort of helping push the public awareness of Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 in the modern age a little bit.
Yeah, it was really the original that he liked. He in fact, it wasn't until a couple years ago he had seen my movie, had heard of. The thing is, there was always Tarantino's the films they would show at his theater. They would vary from action to, you know, old westerns to this and that. So they would have various departments of people that would handle the horror and this and that. The horror guy, he was the one that got Quentin to say, yeah, you can play Silent Night, Deadly Night every year, and every other year they played 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then, cool. And what happened was Quentin had seen at my movie a couple of years back, and he says, oh, just put it on the roster every year now. He never had seen it as what, you know, until recently, and then said, okay, it's good enough to put it out every year. But I was there a couple times to kind of open up the movie and talk about it. And no, it's very, very kind of everyone to you know, call me in and try to get a hold of me. But that was kind of the beginning. Once I had been seen on video, because there were people in the audience filming it, it was kind of like he's alive. He's not, and that's why we went down the path, is because that's how it kind of opened up. Well, he's around, so I was always in Hollywood. That was the thing. He's dead. He's gone. We can't find him. Lee says we can't find him. Nobody can find me, but yet I'm right in Hollywood the whole time.
Well, isn't that kind of the funny thing about public perception? Is as soon as somebody's like not in a movie every few years, like, what happened to that guy? Is he alive? You're like, he's just living his life like you are.
Yeah, you got it. It's I say that, you know, life interrupted when I was making plans, and
sure,
it's exactly what happens. Sure. Yeah.
So I had plans of sticking in the business, and that movie didn't matter to me. It was nice. It was $1,500, 5 days. I was very tickled about it.
Right, because the production schedule was fast for that film. You guys pretty much put that together extremely quickly, because partially the movie's made up so much of the flashbacks. Yeah, you know, which I think is a great reason why I think Tarantino could say he could play it every year, because if someone hasn't seen the first movie, I would almost say just watch the second movie, because you really get a lot of the first movie and more story, so you're never going to get lost.
Yeah, no, there's some darkness that's been edited out, as you know, from the original.
Sure.
But I would say if you had to, I mean, maybe I'm biased, but yeah, just get 2. You got both, you know. So,
you got both, exactly.
Well, so I read recently that when you originally auditioned for it, you didn't audition for the lead role. Is that correct or no?
That is correct. I saw an ad in this drama log. It was kind of like a 15-page circular that came out once a week. They charged $1 for it. It was really pushed for actors that were non-union, but there was a lot of advertisements in it for headshots and services and things that. So a lot of people had advertised in it to get actors to come in and buy stuff, but inside somewhere in the drama log was casting stuff, extra work, this and that. But there was this little thing that said casting for an untitled horror film in Burbank was it. Mm-hmm. And I said, I knew enough to know that they were probably getting ancillary roles. The major roles would have been cast at that point. which was standard. And so, but I did go down there. It's an excellent question because I had read for the cop role where he's standing around Caldwell with Caldwell's the guns to his head, and some cop says, "No, don't do it," and Caldwell kind of laughs maniacally, like stupidly, and that particular cop role is what I read for. And upon leaving that audition, I stopped and talked to Lee. I said, "Thank you." I said, "I'm just curious, who's got the lead?" And albeit, I was a little bit forward to ask, and it wasn't my place. Because I was sick, and you guys would have been sick of my little world too, in the sense of getting these little one-liners and this and that. And
sure.
I was sick of, you want French fries with that, sir? And
Sure.
that kind of stuff. So me, I had my brain, because I had done so much extra work prior. Not that extra work is any launch board or springboard into getting into acting. It's the wrong thing to do, but yet I did it for money, and I did it to get the feel of the business. I didn't grow up in the business. I didn't grow up around cameras. But I wanted to see so I did moonlighting, Cagney, Lacey, extra work. I did, oh God, every episodic show that was then, I did it. And I wanted more. I asked Lee, and Joe, who was the co-writer with Lee of part 2, they had David Heavener, an actor named David Heavener. They had him they had him locked, is what they told me, because they said, "Well, we've got that pretty locked up," and because Joe immediately interrupted when I asked who's got the lead. So I said, "Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah,
I'm not stepping on any toes here," and I left. And then late in the week, I remember I got called. It was Thursday or Friday. I auditioned, can't be certain on the day, but then Monday, I got a call from Lee. I had my office. It's kind of funny because if you understand my office of the technology we have today, your call's in your pocket and you catch it.
Yep.
I had an old cassette to cassette phone answering service and an super old phone, a rotary old phone like from the 40s. And I was high tech. I could actually call from a payphone and retrieve my messages. I was so cool. But the point is, I get a call from Lee on a Monday saying, "Yeah, this is Lee Harry. We're shooting that horror film, and we would like to see you again. It's not for the policeman role, but it's for a different role." So I just thought it was a lateral move. I didn't think I was anything else other than, oh, well, it's not the cop, it's so-and-so. So I showed up, and then he called me again and said, "Eric, we're looking at you for the lead." And I said, "Well, what about this other guy?" They said, "Well, there's been some changes." What the changes were, that I understand today, is Lee and Joe were very, very deadlocked on this guy, David Heavener, but the producer of that, the Malaysian Studios owner, the editing post-production house, Lawrence Applebaum, wanted me for reasons probably like, he looks just like the kid. He looks like he can pick up a house. He's perfect. You need someone that can do kind of throw people around. And
sure.
But Joe had kept saying, it's kind of, I should stress the point, Joe Earl had done this throughout the whole movie of like, well, this other guy we wanted was really doing some crazy things in the audition. He was, he was kind of doing things with his hands, and he was doing things with his face. He's kind of really nuts. And they didn't like how I auditioned with Bloom. They said it was very dark, but I had no reference point. What?
Right, it's a movie about a serial killer Santa. It's inherently dark.
What they did is, when I came up again on that Wednesday, they decided to act out a lot of the scenes they wrote. They put a comical edge on it. They were laughing about saying these lines that I say eventually, and I got the idea. And then they finally said, okay, that we want to change the tenor and tone and darkness of the original. We want to lighten it. So they kind of explained themselves at that point. That I didn't have any context to go do what I did with the Bloom stuff. So, but that's how it came to be. You are right. I went up for a cop role. I spoke up and got the lead, and that is really million to one.
Well, yeah, and I mean so for our listeners, man, let that be a lesson. Like, don't be afraid to tell the powers that be what you want. because you just might get it.
Yeah.
And Eric, I'm curious what your perceptions were of the role once you finally found out that you were playing a killer Santa Claus. Because through all this, it sounds like you really didn't know what this was. It was a horror film that you didn't get the full picture, of course, because the production company can't release all that information. But what were your first thoughts when it's like, okay, now you're going to be putting a Santa Claus outfit and you're going to be killing people?
I didn't get a lot of detail on that day or any other day, because what they were telling me is, hey, we're shooting Monday, but your work starts Tuesday. That's what I knew. And there was other stuff. I had to come back up and sign things and whatever later in the week. But basically, I'm shooting Tuesday, which the full day of Tuesday was the VA. And then Wednesday was the big day of Elizabeth Caton. That the love scene of Elizabeth walking down the sidewalk with her, bumping into Chip, the old flame. The Chip stunt, the strangling stunt with the Liz, the Kenny McCabe with the kind of the Barney Fife cop thing.
Yep.
Bing, bing, bing. We just literally moved over like 10 feet over and then 10 more feet over. And then garbage day, we did the garbage day line and the neighbor coming out with the can.
Yeah.
And then we broke. We did all that. We shot that at garbage day. And what they did at that point, because they still had light, was go straight into that red Chevette, rolls over and blows up bit, the stunt.
Wow. So that's like a lot of pages in like one day.
Yeah, the whole process seems kind of bonkers. Like that's wild.
What was the word? I just said it was voluminous because it didn't end there. As soon as we got the car done, one take, of course, one Chevette, one take, and it was just fortuitous that the car landed back on its wheels.
Oh, thank God.
And that, of course, blows up.
Yeah.
But then as soon as they scraped all that and pulled that away, they continued with garbage day because I still had to walk down the street and walk up the street and side streets and, act nuts. And I didn't even know, they were just like, go down there. And then as soon as you're out of sight over the hill, come back and act crazy, And so I did. I went down over the hill where they couldn't see me. And then I turned back and turned around and was walking, giggling and laughing and doing whatever.
Yeah.
And the light was falling. And then I got into the Santa suit. And the last scene of the day was I was in the Santa suit and I kind of gimped that. I already kind of ruined that little wind-up doll, but in practice, because I thought we had more wind-up dolls. Turns out we don't. I got yelled at for that.
You have one car to blow up. You have one wind-up toy. There's no room for do-overs here in Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
Should have told me this, but because he's like, take this dull axe and try to cut the head off of this thing. Go practice over here, Eric. And,
you can practice on the PA.
Right.
Like, how could you cut a rubber ball with a dull axe? All I was doing is knocking it down the street. The bottom line is we ended up the day by just doing the exterior of the outside of Mother Superior's house. Me walking up and knocking on the door. That was it. And then the next day, then we did all the interior stuff to that business.
That really isn't like an incredible pace that you not only did all this exterior street stuff, then blew up a car, and then you're like, okay, company move, let's go shoot an exterior somewhere else. That's kind of amazing. So, so was it kind of like you just a couple takes, do the garbage day line, like, did we get it? Yeah, move on. Like, because with that amount of stuff in one day, I can't imagine lingering too long to get a lot of multiple takes.
No lingering. No talking to Lee. It's not against him. He just was. Lawrence Applebaum, as I mentioned earlier, was kind of a bigger than life, kind of New Yorker, no nonsense guy, and he was always there. He's usually there with his arms crossed, right next to Lee's. Lee's like fussing over the shot. If I had to put Lee in any category, he was like a miniature Hitchcock trying to get the stunt shot to the cool cinematic shot. It really wasn't in his interest to know or care what I was doing, and it clearly shows. But I remember in that day 2, and all the hectic business of waiting around and watching him, that I remember I said, Lee, you got a minute? I'd like to. He says, Eric, I really don't. It was actually a good learning process, because later when I worked for David Dakota, a couple of things he does, he's a very competent director, but the material suffers. But he was the same way. One shot, get and go. One shot and go. So you were exactly right. If we had 2 takes or even 3 takes, it would have had to been an error in the microphone or the audio. Have to be. and there was no other reason to just not, so the garbage day thing was, I remember I wanted to ask him, what do you want it like? Do you want it like a Clint Eastwood, or do you want it over the, there was a lot of energy coming into garbage day, so that it was extremely awful, but also, I guess, almost right for what he had done.
It's iconic.
It's kind of that magical happy accident.
Our friend Greg, who is one of our regular he calls into the show a lot, he'll call me randomly still at like 2:00 in the morning and just shout "garbage day" into the phone and hang up. And to me, that's how iconic it is for like me and my group of friends, that like it's delivered very well, in my opinion.
It sounds like there really wasn't almost any development of performances then between you and the director. So is that pretty much what it was like the whole time on that film, was just read the script and they weren't really working with you on multiple takes and performances?
Well, I mean, there wasn't a script. I would get these individual pages. Well, you would figure there isn't a script because I'm usually talking about, what happened here, and then we go back to the original, so there was sections of like the Bloom and the VA where it was pages, and then there's other pages with where I'm in the movie exclusively, second half, but there wasn't a script at all. There was just individual pages at different parts of the script. So, but there wasn't any conversation at all. There was zero conversation of like, how do you want this played,
right?
And or any of that, or how big, I know that Lee and Joe had read a book. It's called The Stand. It was written by famous
Stephen King.
Stephen King.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why would I forget that? And they read that prior when they thought of Caldwell, when they were dreaming him up. So they had a particular idea already cemented in their minds what they wanted. So, and that's why they wanted Heavener. And then I think Larry came along and said, you want this other kid because he's exactly what you want. He's commercial. He's this. He looks like the young. I said he didn't like the other guy for some reason. So he could rule over them and say, well, let's get him. He'll be better for our bottom line. But there wasn't any talking to Lee whatsoever. I know that Joe Earl, who I really like this guy, he's the nicest guy in the world. He was always on the side, off camera, more accessible to me. But he would be, Eric, you need to give more here. Or Eric, you're really not doing. I remember at one point, and it was really awful what I was doing. We did one take, and I was pissed because I wasn't up for it. We had lunch or something, and it was the gun to the head, and Caldwell's like completely so bad it's good in a way. Yeah. But he was doing that thing, and Joe had said when that was over, and Lee said, cut, print, and then Joe said, Eric, that was awful. And I said, Joe, I know. I said, let's do it again. Because I wanted Joe to go and say, hey, Lee, but we didn't. And I said, well, whatever. But he didn't have any qualms of telling me that it wasn't working for him. Because, frankly, that scene wasn't working for me. I would have loved to have had more flow to it. It was to me, it was disconnected, a few things. This maniacal laugh, the gun.
Yeah,
it was really choppy.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to say to it, because I'm a critic of it, because it's me up there, you can understand.
Well, of course, you're always your worst critics.
But I would say this, and I can appreciate you guys liking it, and millions of others, and I know why. Because if the dude had freaking energy and the movie had energy, we picked up the pace of the original, and it's fun. It's a fun movie.
Yes, exactly. I think that's what it comes down to. It's like people I consider myself a cinephile, but I appreciate everything on the range of, from Citizen Kane to Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, because there's no distinction of what makes cinema. Cinema, it comes from the enjoyment of it and what the feelings you get out of it. And it's an experience.
Yeah.
And Silent Night, Deadly Night has a special place to me. As far as Christmas and horror, it is absolutely fun. And there's also an element, I feel like it's almost like an experimental film because of how it was assembled. And the fact that they wanted an editor to cut the footage of one whole movie into another movie, and then they supplement it with additional footage to make an entire sequel, really has not been done since or before, as far as I'm aware of. This is not a typical way you assemble a picture. And there's some sort of magic energy that comes through the final product because of that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Lee Harry had once said that. He said, Eric, it was a Rubik's cube, and only Joe and I knew how to get the colors right. And
Sure.
it's like a jigsaw puzzle where they just kind of throw it all over the room and say, okay, put it together.
Man, now that you say it, I would have loved for them to give you some more takes so I could have heard that Clint Eastwood garbage day delivery.
Yeah, because I thought, well, maybe it should be real subtle and quiet where you kind of, he says it to himself.
Right.
It would have worked both ways. And when you think about it, everything that came up to that point, I think it would have been nice if he would have pulled back. That would have worked.
Sure. And right now it adds to the overall chaos of everything that's happening in that whole scene. That is one of the most iconic scenes, I think, obviously, of the whole movie. I think people will always remember that.
Yeah, and I was shocked as anyone to see other people watching this movie all these years later, waiting for that garbage day. And to me, I've never understood the allure, but that's because it's me. But it's a kind of a point where everyone can kind of laugh and go, ha, and clap and stuff. And I'm like, huh? I'm kind of lost. And I like the Frank's impaling with the
yes,
umbrella, far better.
It is strange the things that people ultimately latch on to, like the moments that become iconic to the horror community. It can kind of be random sometimes, but there's something, a little magic dust in that scene that nobody can quite put their finger on.
Yeah, I guess so. I'll take it. I don't want to even try to surmise what is the allure, but rather enjoy it. It's hard for me to be in a theater full of people watching it because it's another time for who is that guy up there,
Right. You have a very different experience now, I guess, when you go back and view this movie. So how long was it between the times that you did the movie, you said you sort of moved on and forgot about it, to say 2013 or whenever it was when the Finding Freeman movement found you and you realized this movie had become a sleeper hit amongst the horror community? How long was it between you that you'd even not seen the movie?
Very, very long. To add to that, I had never, ever seen the original up till, this 6 or so years ago when I bought you probably have this, that was a double. It was the original and part 2 in a double pack DVD.
Right.
I bought that. It's like $10 eBay, and I watched the original, and I said, oh man, I get it. I understand it now. I thought, I didn't know the actor then. And I said, well, he did exactly what he should have done. And Robert was great. Robert was an unknown person entirely. Mm-hmm. That first time out, that was his first audition, and he gets a major motion picture on with TriStar. That's pretty heady, out of nowhere. And we both had talked about that. I said, that's proves that the guy just had a lot of talent. He came out of nowhere and showed that this is how it's done. And, and it's true. I mean, I'm sure they took half of Hollywood's, men at that age they wanted and were auditioning for it. So that's something to be proud of, to come out of nowhere and get it. So, yeah, he did a great job. And I didn't know what he did or even seen it. And then I watched mine, which is the combination, and thought, well, I really kind of went,
But like you said, you were more or less flying blind. You didn't know the Rubik's Cube. You didn't know how these things were going to be assembled. You didn't know the tone, and you didn't have direction. So how could you be expected to understand?
Would have been nice. I would say we wouldn't be talking today if I did see it, because I was smart enough. I was a smart young man. I would have been smart enough not to. I would have dialed it down considerably having seen it, but I didn't. So I have to go with what they were giving me. Joe and Lee were laughing about what they wrote, and belly laughs, and I was looking at this going, okay, I can do this. Yeah. So,
sure. And then it is what it is today. Now it's a horror holiday classic. So to tangent a little bit from murdering Santa Clauses, I'm just curious, what are some of your favorite holiday movies? Not talking horror, just Christmas movies in general. What are some of your favorite watches?
I don't have any particular movies I like, but I do always watch Die Hard once a year.
Hell yeah. It is the greatest Christmas movie ever made.
Yeah, someone else who agrees that it is, in fact, a Christmas movie.
Yeah, it's absolutely a Christmas movie. Like,
I don't talk about Christmas a few times in the, and for the, what was that, the Nakatomi building?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Christmas decorations in the background.
Arguably, the first two Die Hard movies are both very much Christmas films.
Right. And I say, if especially coming from a genre fans, right, if you're going to call any horror movie that takes place on Christmas a Christmas movie, then you have to do the same thing with the action genre. It's an action movie that takes place on Christmas.
100%.
Also a Christmas movie.
100%.
Can't pick and choose, everybody.
Yeah, you're right. They talk enough about Christmas, so you really got to say it as a Christmas.
Ho, 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 now I have a machine gun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But all in all, very well acted, a well written.
Oh, it's a blast.
A good movie that made a ton of money. So,
Oh, yeah.
I like it. I watch that every year. I for years I would still watch It's a Wonderful Life and all these things just because
Sure.
there's sappiness to it, as you know, guys, but also there's such a good story.
Yeah.
Of, how we affect others in their lives and how if we're not, I do believe that to be true, that you take somebody out of the equation, it'll skew time and space and it'll change history in a way. So in that respect, it was well thought out. I don't know. I like those kinds of movies too. I like going back. I do like those older actors and Claude Rains and Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas. And I'm not in the horror genre per se. Someone says, "What's your favorite horror film?" I'd say I don't even want to say this. I've never seen Nightmare on Anything, Elm Street 1 or
I've never seen A Nightmare on Any Street at all.
Cinema has a long history of actors that aren't necessarily into the genre, that they're like a great example. Sir Alec Guinness in Star Wars was so certain that the movie was going to fail that because he wasn't a sci-fi guy that he didn't want his name connected to it at all. So it's not unheard of for, the star of a film to not necessarily be into that genre.
Yeah. And I guess in that sense, I follow suit. I'm not connected with the horror community at all.
But have you done any of the conventions or anything and met with some of the fans of the movie?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to do a number of those conventions, and I was very apprehensive, clearly. I said, oh, they don't know me. They don't want to know me.
Oh, they do.
Oh, I was going to say, the minute you think that as a horror icon, you are wrong.
I was very wrong. It was the guy it's the manager of Robert Brian Wilson from the first movie that contacted me, and I remember his email, something about the brothers that slay together. He wanted me to come along to accent, to have a stronger showing for the seven. It was Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, first one. And I know they came from Canada. Some guy flew in from Los Angeles. And I said, I live in Los Angeles. Let's have lunch. And I was making a joke of it because I couldn't understand someone flying in to see me,
and that was in Columbus. There's actually a pretty good little horror community in Columbus. They have every year the Nightmares Festival happens there. The Gateway Cinema does a lot of horror screenings throughout the year.
Yeah, no, and I soon learned that, as you said, it's a community that they forgive a lot of things. Well, I may not look like that guy, or they just, hey, we love this guy. They'll show up with things they made in the garage, SNDN2 stuff for me to sign, or always a story with it. I make sure I talk to everyone that I really want to know, where'd you come in from? And
well, and from a horror fan perspective, that's what we're looking for. Those are the guys that we remember the most, the guys that'll sit there and have, even if it's just a 2 or 3 sentence conversation with us. You know what I mean? The fact that they take the time to be like, wow, thanks for liking my work. That means more than you know.
And that's what the conventions are all about. The horror fans go there not only connect with each other, but connect with the people that they love from the movies.
I soon found out. I didn't really know what it was about, but there's been all kinds of people that are literally in tears telling me that their dad had shown them the movie when they were quite young, and every year their dad and would watch it with them, and their dad's passed away now, so they would it was so ingrained in them of good times.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
This is something we do every Christmas, and we hang a wreath out on the door, and it's a SNDN2 wreath, and I'm more interested in what they have to say than me, and it's genuine. It's like, hey, I did this. You like it? I was like, you like it? And I still to this day is like, you really like it then? I'll never have a swollen head over it. I'm very happy to have, if 10 people like it, 10 people like it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, we both love it. It's iconic. We're so happy to have you here on the show with us. And one thing I would love to move to talk about now is something that you and I talked about on the phone quite a bit, which is the script that you wrote, Unhinged, which is the Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 sequel that you wrote, which is, what is that? It's over 100 pages, about 120?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I finished reading, and it is fantastic. It was an absolute blast to read. So thank you for sending that to me. Yes.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
I wrote it, and then I realized no one wants to read script out here anyhow, so I wrote the synopsis, and which I found to be harder.
Sure.
Because you got to take 125 pages and bring it down to 2, and try to get the flavor of it. You don't want to lose anything, but you're going to.
Right. Which I'll admit, I didn't read your synopsis. I jumped straight to the script because I didn't want to have any spoilers for myself.
Yeah, same.
Which I'm so thankful about, because the first 5 pages had me almost like rolling out of my chair. It was fantastic. It just goes from 0 to 60 so damn quick.
Thank you guys, because I that's what I really. We've all seen the penitentiary or the insane asylum scenes, and they drag on too long.
Right.
And like, oh Lord, what? And I wanted to establish him in there, and then have things go real wrong for him, and have him escape.
Oh yeah,
right. In a way that you don't expect, though, like because you set up scenes we've seen before. The like, oh, I think he's gonna escape from prison. Then you think you know everything you know about Ricky. The way you set it up is actually quite a lot of twists and turns.
Thank you. I just that came from that part of our conversation earlier where I had seen this Finding Freeman and all this hubbub about it, and Garbage Day 6 million hits video. Sure. And come on, wow. And, but then what I did wrongly that day is I was searching around and I went into like the negative of it. Mm-hmm. People saying, well, he's horrible. He's this, he's that. He's double horrible. And I was like, oh, but then when they started talking that they knew the backstory of the film and how they were there, literally they were talking like, well, the word is so-and-so. And so that's when I got angry. I could take the hits, that's fine, but when you weren't there and you didn't know how it was, and you guys have just heard what it was like, it was I was on my own, and it's no hit to Lee because the guy was trying to do everything he could to get it done in time. So, but the point is that's when I was driving this Mustang back from Minnesota to California, and I came in my head says, well, I'll show you. And, I can do this. I have done some good work. I've done very good work in auditions where the casting director calls the agent and said, well, holy shit, he's perfect, except for he won't fit this family structure we have. So we'll keep him in mind. But I know things I've done, and I know what I can do. And so in my head, it was like, I'll show you. So the idea was formed in my head on a 2,000-mile trip. And, when I got back to LA, it was I searched out some Final Draft software for a script, writing scripts, and I proceeded. I loaded it on my computer, and I organically wrote this thing. But I thought that I am very particular. And you two are probably the same way. Where why would you bring up something as half-assed or not good? So what I tried to do is my best, and then I refined it a bit and cut it down but I still think what I have here, I think it's damn good, frankly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a blast. And what's great about it is that it's a Silent Night, Deadly Night sequel without being a total Christmas sequel. There's enough Christmas there to remind you where this movie came from, but it goes in an entirely different direction.
And the kills are absolutely brutal. I think that's probably the best thing about it for me. Like, grinding someone's face off, like that's yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorites, without giving spoilers away, was the tripwire where the guy lands face first into a bear trap.
Like that's fantastic.
I was a big fan of that one.
Oh yeah, no, I that was because I have been in these old barns, and perhaps you two have too, where they always have these old rusty implements on the wall. Where it's just the weirdest. You see old size and things. You see these old cutting things and chains.
Right. Where it's just a matter of time before someone falls into a pickaxe.
It's like, what do you need this for, really?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I've seen these old bear traps, and I think how cruel and how awful they are. And I've seen these things opened up, and it's it's like a set of teeth from like the Jaws movie, and it's in a Wham. And I thought, you know, and so that I appreciate. No, I like the heinous aspect of the deaths because they aren't a bullet, they aren't a piece of lead,
right.
They're very Caldwell.
And Caldwell's beyond proficient at killing in this script. He's like a pro.
Yeah, no, he's honed his craft and he hasn't done it in 25 years. But it was fun.
It's like riding a bicycle, you know.
There were classic stuff in there, and I appreciate it.
The only unfortunate thing is you might have to rethink the title Unhinged now that new Russell Crowe movie came out. But
I thought of that the other day in a sense that here's a movie that, you know, probably was written when I wrote mine, and here it's getting done, and it's there, big movie star. What I did think is, well, if I can I get mine done? B, people forget that movie. Maybe it change. I don't care. Change the title. You know how it. Yeah. You know, if anyone got their hands on it, they'd want to monkey with it because everyone's a director, everyone's a writer. Unhinged, it doesn't matter. It could be called The Return of Caldwell for all I care.
I was gonna say you should just call it Caldwell.
Yeah,
like
and I think you got in a good place too because I don't know if anybody saw that Russell Crowe movie. I think that's like one of the first movies they tried to put out in quarantine, and people were like, nah. Pass.
Yeah,
it didn't get its due, and I want to see it. I was gonna look at it the other night and thought, you know, it's got to be decent. It's gonna be decent. So in my world, I said, oh, that's unfortunate. It's just that, and I put that little line in somewhere in the movie, like that boy's unhinged, you know.
Yes.
And, you know, and because I thought it was funny that the pathologist lady that always seemed to be on the scene after the fact, checking these bodies out, and she admired his quality of his kills. You know, she's
like, I wish I could live this free.
You know, I don't know. She knows, she's like, you got to admire his work.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, that part and the assistant getting his face ground off, or the golf club stuff, and you know where you don't see, it's a kind of a reveal. He drives away and you see it.
Exactly. Yes.
And you just you go, oh Lord.
And you're doing this with a show, Scripts Gone Wild, coming up. I think you're doing like a script reading.
Just a few days. Yes. They called me. The guy that runs that called me about part 2. Let's read part 2, and I said, well, where's the script? I didn't have one.
Yeah, it's like, if you have it, that's a miracle.
So, yeah, he said, well, there is one. And I said, well, someone took the time. And the bottom line is, I just mentioned Unhinged. He said, what's that? And then, you know, I gave him what I could on it. I sketched it out, and excellent. He said, send it to me. And I did. And 2 hours later, he calls me and says, let's do it. I love it. Let's do it. And
that's fucking awesome.
That's awesome. So that'll be out by the time this episode drops. But you guys should go check out Scripts Gone Wild for the Unhinged read-through.
Yeah.
And one of our recent guests on the show, Galen Howard, is going to be reading some of the roles on that, Scripts Gone Wild. I don't know who he's going to be reading exactly, but that should be pretty cool.
Yeah, he's got his own group. You know, it's got his own bank of people that he's doling it out. I asked about Justin. There's a guy, Justin Powell. He's got a Pizzelle, he goes by. He's got his own horror clan, his own little thing going on the YouTube. And I asked about letting Justin in on it. So as one of the detectives. And so Justin will be on there. So we'll be kind of going into their world. So we're kind of the new kids in the new school, you know. But, you know.
And it should be pretty interesting to hear like a fresh table read with all these different actors, hearing your script sort of come to life.
Yeah, they have a particular way they do it. They drink during it. And there are certain rules that they will have to stop and drink a shot if this or that happens. Or if someone flubs a line, they have to drink. You have to down their drink. So there is inebriation and Caldwell at the same place. So,
that sounds like the perfect mix. And are you reading for Caldwell?
I apparently so.
Okay, good.
So,
apparently
that's awesome.
So. We'll find out.
I need to bone up on this. I wrote it, but I'll have to look at this to get the flavor again.
Yeah, you know, put on a Santa suit and like yell at yourself in the mirror for like an hour and get in the vibe. You know?
I shouldn't have any trouble with them. I hope I don't flub anything, but I'll do my best, and it should be fun. I thought it was a good idea to like, hey, you know, it's out here. Let's read this. People's imaginations, as you know, you two liked it, and I really appreciate that you liked it. But there's something to be said from like hearing it being read, and if the person doing the exposition between the lines is very colorful and he can bring it to life, it'll make all our jobs easier. I think there's a lot there. that can come alive if done right.
Yeah, and for a writer, I think like hearing a table read is where the script really starts to either, like you said, fall flat in areas or come alive. And I think that's where really you can tell what parts work and what parts don't when you finally hear actors read lines aloud. Sort of like that's when I always realize, oh wow, that didn't work the way I thought it was going to work. And then certain things need a little housekeeping.
Yeah, and there might be that in there a few places, and I sure hope not in the sense that, oh, that fell flat. I thought that was going to be, and that is always a gamble, as you know, and I'm hoping that it can be received appropriately.
Yeah, and so do we. We hope people really get a kick out of it because we got a kick out of it reading it. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun on Scripts Gone Wild.
But I appreciate your kindness of bringing that up because it was a labor of love
for sure, man.
And we can tell. And to us, Ricky will always be one of cinema's iconic killer Santa Clauses, both as fans of horror and fans of Christmas. Eric, thank you so much for joining us and talking with us about all this. It really means a lot for you to take the time.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. This has been a treat for us. An absolute treat.
No, thank you. And I appreciate it.